Last week, I posted a reel featuring this design in front of you today. Within a few seconds, it spiked with the YouTube algorithm and you guys absolutely loved it. So today I want to show you exactly how I designed it and how you can recreate the same in ArchiCAD 25. What's going on, guys? My name's David Tomic and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining me. On this channel, we talk all things architecture and technology. Today, we're going over one of my favorite alteration and addition projects in the real world. Yes, this is a 100% real project, and no, I'm not going to be showing you anything from the real project. We're just going to be recreating the actual external elevation. Okay, so like always, we start with the Australian Select template because that is what is available to me. You guys can use whatever is available to you. On the left-hand side of my screen, I'm going to be having my reference image, which is this design that we're talking about today. And for you, it is basically going to be above me, slightly situated, so you can always reference back to it to see how the mind works and what we're actually doing to create something like this in the existing reference image. We're going to start straight away by tapping Control and F7 to open up our ground settings. The first thing we want to do here is change from first to ground ceiling, and then we're simply going to delete the roof line because we don't need it. We only need 300 millimeters above, and simply inserting a layer below, calling it footings and going minus 172 will give us the overall totals that we need. So there isn't anything fancy here. It is a single story house with just two different pitching gable roofs that create the effect that we're going for. So we'll click OK, go delete stories. We don't have to worry about them too much. So if we double click on our footings layer and go to our slab tool, so we can select our slab. Let's change our slab generic to just a 250 millimeter with the timber finish. It doesn't really matter at this stage. We're going to be using this slab as our guide. So let's say we're looking at this house, left side, starting at the crosshairs intersection 0, 0. We're going to draw our first shape. And that first shape is the existing sleeping quarters or the private section of this house. It's basically something like a 6 meter by 8 meter box. So if we type in 8 meters, tab button, 6 meters and press enter, we will get the foundation of what we see there on the left. Now, before we go any further, I'm going to click once, select all of these elevation and section markers, Control D, click again, and just simply move them out of the way because we don't need them. Next, I'm going to hold the Alt button, clicking on that original slab that we just drew. Then I'm going to start by drawing that tunneling concrete blade wall section. So for me, that is a very long, narrow section. It's something like 2 meters wide and let's call it 12 meters long. I'm then going to click on that, go Control D and move it to the front of our building. Go Control D again, holding Shift, tapping the D key, and I'm going to move it about 2.5 meters forward away from the private sleeping quarters. Then I'm going to repeat that same step for the public open spaces that we see on the right hand side. So if I click this original slab, Control D and then Control again, clicking on a corner node, dragging it all the way across whilst holding Shift allows me to drag it 100% straight, clicking on the edge, then clicking on one of these edge lines here and going offset edge. If I drag it all the way back, I can see it's about 8 meters. And realistically in this image, it's double, if not even triple that original space. So let's just simply type in 24 minus, gives us basically that elongated shape that we're looking at on the right hand side. That 24 meters is probably a bit of an overkill, so I'm just going to click on it, drag it back 4 meters and call that 20 meters public, 8 meters private with a 2 meter vertical separation in the middle. Now I do know that in real life this extends a little bit further, if not another 2.5 meters that way, but we're not really getting to see too much of that elevation, so it isn't too critical at this point in time. Now if we come up to our ground floor plan by double clicking on ground, right clicking on footings, showing as trace reference, we can see the underside of what we just drew for those slabs. Let's start with our wall tool, change our generic wall, and I'm going to change that to 270 mil block work. Now, those concrete walls can be concrete, they can be polished plaster, they can be a rendered finish, they can be whatever you want. But for me personally, in this instance, I'm gonna make them a rendered finish or polished plaster. So first things first, let's zoom in to our concrete pad. for that vertical separation, holding shift, clicking once, clicking OK to finish that series wall, and then repeating that same step there, clicking and holding shift at the same time, allows us basically to create these blade walls. Now, those blade walls are at very different heights and they are subject to the height of our roof line. So we will play with them a little bit further and a little bit later down the track. We just simply want to get them in the position for now. Now we want to come across to our wall tool. Again, change that wall section. Let's go 90mm block work because we want to keep it the same blocks and bricks all the way around so we don't have to worry about it. Tapping the P key to flip that wall where we need it, continuing it all the way around to our traced reference slab, and then once again repeating that same step on the other side of the public spaces. Now if we come into our 3D up the top, we'll see that we've started to create what is basically the foundation of this house. Our slab is a little bit low, so if I hold the shift button, click on all three, Command D or Control D depending on what system you're on, I can drag that all the way up to the ground floor so it aligns properly with where it needs to go. If we come back into our ground floor plan, holding the Alt key allows me basically to select this wall here. Now, if we hold the Alt key, we can basically copy this wall on the left-hand side, holding the Shift key, tapping P to flip it, and simply aligning it with the edge of our blade wall. I'm then going to click on that brick wall, Control D or Command D, clicking on one of the edges, going all the way in, holding shift, tapping the D key again to activate our distance marker, and I'm then going to go 2.5 meters minus, so I have a 2.5 meter offset between those two walls. There is a false wall here that basically connects those two spaces. So if I draw an additional wall here by tapping the P button again to flip that wall where it needs to go, selecting that wall we've just drawn, Control D or Command D, and pushing that back, let's say 1 meter for the time being, basically creates that false illusion of the wall. At the same time, this wall is basically beefed up for no reason other than to really give it that power and structure. So if I click once on the edge, hold shift, tap D, 300 and return it in, we have our blade wall that is for this side. What I do want to do now is select these two walls, go Control M to mirror it, then tap the Control button, click on one of the nodes and hold shift to mirror it perfectly the other way, and then Control D allows me to move it across all the way to the edge of our other blade wall. Now from memory, I know that space there is about 6 meters wide, so I can simply click Control D again and go 6 meters to extend that all the way. Clicking on our secondary wall, dragging all the way in, and coming back to 3D to see what we've started to create. So as you can see, we have our black Maxline cladding piers on both sides here. They basically connect to our roof lines and then intersect to the back of the house. Now if we come back into our ground floor plan, we no longer need this section of the wall, so I'm going to press Alt G to ungroup and click on the external node and reconnect to the edge of that wall. Over here is a private alfresco dining. Isn't very deep at the moment, it's only about 2.5 meters. So what I'm going to do is select that wall and once again push that another 500 meters, select all three walls and Control I to really give us that emphasis of depth in that alfresco dining. Then I'm going to click on my footings layer, right click on ground floor, show as trace, click on my slab, click once again and select insert new node. I'll align the new node with the edge of my actual external wall, clicking on the exterior line once more and offsetting that edge to where it needs to be. I'll repeat that same step for this section of the house over here and the private section of the sleeping quarters as well. So that way I have, if I come back to my 3D, the extension of the slab coming all the way through on all sides. Coming back to our ground floor plan, I'm going to simply select this wall and extend it all the way across because that is roughly where my front door is going to be. My roof's going to run back that way, hide, conceal and disappear, and my other two roofs are basically going to connect off this, pitch all the way up and connect back to the main space. Now, if you're new to this channel, you probably haven't checked out the links down below. The first link in the description is essential for every single architecture student or anybody in the architecture profession for that matter. It is a direct link to my website that features the construction and sketch design sketch list package, which is fundamental and pivotal for anybody who is looking to start their career or accelerate their career. It is basically a PDF checklist that you can go through and check off every single page and every single item, so you know that for sure whatever is going out of your office into somebody else's hands is going to be 100% correct. So if we press Control up arrow, we'll go to our ground ceiling plan, which is where we can start creating our roof. If we go to the roof tool and then just using the generic wall shell, it's not that important. We are going to align it with the outside of our brick leaf and tie that first leaf all the way to the edge of our concrete blade wall. I'm going to select the external side where I want it to connect, draw my first line, click OK, and selecting that roof, Control M mirrors it, tap Control to actually get a duplicate, holding Shift flips it, Control D allows us to select that node and move it very quickly and very easily. Now that I have these two roof planes connected, what I can do is hold Control on one of these roof edges to automatically find the perfect center. If I repeat that same step with this other side of the roof, it will automatically join those two roofs together. That is a really, really handy tip to know if you ever can't figure out how those roofs align or where they should intersect. If we come back now into 3D, we'll see that we've started to create what is the foundation of that roof. So if I hold Shift and click on both of those roof slabs, I'll see that it's a 22-degree pitch. I'm going to bump that up to about 30 degrees, then select my external wall, hold, come down to stretch height, go just past the gable of the roof, right click on that wall, connect solid element operations. That wall is automatically selected as the target. I'm then going to select the two roofs as the operator, select with an upwards extrusion. I do believe it's going to be about 10 mil short. So if I click execute, we'll see that most of that wall is trimmed, but not all of it. So we'll simply then select our roof, extend it 32 millimeters past and 32 millimeters past. We'll do the same thing on both edges. I can close that palette, and there is our first gable roof on the left-hand side, which basically allows us now to emulate how tall this blade structure is going to be. So if I click on an external node, go to the top of that roof, I know I want that to be at least 500 millimeters higher than that. So let's type in 5500. It'll bump that wall just past that roof line. Coming back into our ground ceiling, I can click on one of these roofs, right click Command D, Control button, and intersect that with the edge of our external leaf again, and then I can extend that all the way into our secondary blade wall. By repeating the same steps we did before, Control M, tapping Control, clicking on a node, holding Shift, Control D, and moving that to the edge of our brick pier. Then clicking on one roof, holding Control, clicking once, reselect, Control, click again. We can now come into our 3D element and visualize what we've done with that secondary private space. All of a sudden, that is starting to come together very, very quickly and very, very easily without us having to do an excessive amount of work to actually make this as architectural as we see in this example image. Because I know this gable section here of the roof is going to surpass this significantly, I'm going to draw that in first. So holding the Alt key, I'm going to come to the edge of my external leaf here and draw a nice big gable on that side of the roof that goes all the way up. Coming into 3D, that blade wall is still too far for me, so what I'm going to do is come back into my ground ceiling, Control down, and then I'm going to select all of these walls and that roof. I'm going to go Command D and I'm going to push that back 2 meters, then realign that wall with the edge of our mass wall and realign that wall with the same concrete blade wall. Coming back into 3D, let's see if we've managed to articulate it a little bit better. Yes, it's definitely coming back together a bit more. So we're going to continue to lower this. Let's try 20 degrees, which is almost perfect. And if I drop that 1 more degree, let's call it 19 degrees, that'll be a near perfect connection at the top. We would obviously do that in actual roof pitching degrees instead of just randomly selecting. But for the purposes of this, knowing that it's going to go everywhere around the world, there are all sorts of different construction standards that it would be just way too hard to get into. So we're just keeping things relatively generic. Make sure that you apply your construction guides, your construction knowledge, and your industry regulations to whatever you do design, because what you see on YouTube doesn't mean it can actually be built. Now that that little bit's out of the way, we can select this secondary blade wall, click on this here, and let's bump that up to about 7 meters. I want to extend it just a little bit more than what we had before. I do want to make this slightly higher, so if I select these two, let's go 35 degrees instead of 30 degrees, and then continue to increase this wall on the front of the roof as well to about 23 degrees, so it aligns like it needs to. Then I'm simply going to come back into my ground floor, control up, holding the Alt key, selecting this gable roof that we've recently created, and duplicating it on this side of the house. Coming back into 3D, we'll see we've quickly duplicated that 24 degree roof on this side of the house, which allows us really to keep creating, keep going. I'm going to select both of these walls and extend them well past the gable roof above. Right click again, connect solid element operations, select our two roofs, add as operator, subtract with upwards, and execute. So now all we have to do is basically adjust our roof shell to make sure that it goes all the way to the edge of our wall and trims off that additional bit of roof. Coming back into our ground floor by tapping control down, I don't want that to intersect. The easiest way without going into all intersection priorities is backspace 0.9 and it will stop intersecting. Again, backspace 1 decimal down, 0.9, and there you go. It will no longer intersect with the side of that wall. It does cause headaches. If you want to do it properly, you actually need to go through and change the intersection priorities, but we're not worrying about that today. I do also want to extend these two walls up past the roof and this front wall past the roof as well. So if I select all 4 of those walls, right click, solid element operations, selecting our two roofs, add as operator, upwards, execute, we finish off our design almost perfectly without too many issues. Now overall, that house is really starting to come together. The only element missing is this wall section here. So I'm going to go Control T to open up those settings, extend that 1 meter higher so we get some depth, some grandeur in that space. Coming to my ground floor, hold Alt and draw a new wrapping roof going all the way back to the end of the house. So going into 3D, you'll see that roof's been created going backwards at a very steep slope. Control D allows us to move it all the way to the top, and I'm simply just going to change that to say 3 degrees so you cannot see it and it disappears behind. Last but not least, there's only one wall that we've forgotten about on the right hand side that we didn't drag all the way past and trim the roof shell to it. So we're quickly going to repeat the same identical steps, trim that roof shell, and finish off the front of our architectural designed home. Now, as a quick little side note, if you're wondering why on earth this design was actually created like it was created, basically the fundamental architectural principles are an existing dwelling here on the left hand side that needed to be extended, but it also needed to be very thermally comfortable and thermally broken. So the two concrete mass thermal walls are basically going to radiate heat into these two spaces, especially this larger public open space that is one grand void with raking ceilings while still allowing northern light through the extended concrete blade on the right hand side. The main portal was actually an extension of the floor plan. It was a living area that was extended further out to create space, as was the alfresco here on the right hand side, while the left hand portal was basically a mirrored image and an emulation only to create architectural symmetry in the balanced elevation. However, overall, that is the fundamental principles of why we went with this design: thermal mass breaking the two public and private spaces while hiding all of the services, all of the car yards, everything behind the design, and driving all the way around. Now we can start going into our window design and what we did to actually create this elevation. There isn't actually too much. I won't go into it too deep. So let's go into our ground floor plan. Let's go window, and we're just going to drop a couple random windows in here that we can come back to and edit as we see fit in 3D. So I've placed 5 windows here. I'm also going to place one large door at the front. We're going to call it a nice big HV grid door. I'm going to place that smack bang in the middle. I'll adjust that later as well. And we also want a nice sliding door. So if we come back into our window settings, type in sliding, we can find a basic sliding door. Let's select this one here and click OK. There are two sliding doors identical to each other in this design, but they're significantly larger. We're just going to place them there for the time being, come into 3D and actually start exploring these windows in 3D. So this window here on the right hand side goes all the way to the slab itself and is approximately 2.7 high. So if we type that in, we'll get what we're looking for. Extending it a little bit further, let's call that 1700 wide. This window here, we're then simply going to adjust it to the same height and reduce it in overall height to 600 millimeters. There are two windows side by side there. I do remember there was an opening in this space. We're just going to leave that blank for the time being. Now this main window in the main portal at the front, we're going to click Command T and searching for a better window that is more applicable to our situation, which is this double sash here. Command M to flip it down the center where it needs to be and drag it into the position, extending it all the way out, then pressing Control T or Command T, coming into our settings, going to shape, changing that to 4655, I think it was roughly. No, tapping the M key, let's just measure that, 4995. So Control T again, 4995. Will get us exactly what we're looking for there. Now looking at this design further, that roof can most likely be dropped, that 500 mil that we extended it previously, dropping that wall level 2 to the underside and extending this door all the way as wide as it needs to be and as tall as it needs to be as well. So we'll make that a 2.7 door. Open up the settings by going Control T. Let's first of all change this orange because I absolutely hate seeing orange on the floor plans. Going to our HV grid settings and changing our verticals from 3 to 2 and from 3 to 2 as well. So we have a very simple, clean architectural door. Now we click OK on that and we have our finished product there for that door. Coming across to our ground floor plan, let us extend these sliding doors as wide as we need. Let's call them 3.6. Hold Alt and Control at the same time. Extends that all the way. Gives us nice big sliding doors. And then these two windows, I'm simply going to drag out and shrink a little bit at the same time. So I'll make them 600. Holding Alt, Control drops them all the way down. So that's basically our glass structure that we have our image on the left. If we click on this final window over here, we can go into our dash options, change our HV grid to HV grid, simply going to 2 gives us an overall simple look and then clicking OK. Now I'm going to select all of my windows at once, right click, Control T, change them from orange to black and change my materials from stainless steel or aluminium to black as well. I'll repeat that same step for these two doors and that front door, and then I'll introduce a highlight window above that door as well. Now the rest of the design is very simple. It is just materials and claddings. So if we select our 2-blade walls, Command T, override all of our surfaces, go concrete. Let's change that to concrete 23, click OK. We have our first blade concrete walls. Next, we're going to select the exterior edges of our house and right click Command T. Then only the exterior needs to be changed on this one. Let's go horizontal pine for the time being, go OK. We have our nice timber feature coming through. Now I'm going to click on all of our roof sections here. Go to my CI tools, covering, roof covering. We'll open up the CI tools roof covering tool. If you don't have this, you can get it through ArchiCAD. It is a subscription paid plugin, but it is phenomenal and I highly recommend it. You can use any other roof covering system as well or mimic it in Twinmotion with a material, but otherwise we are basically going to click through, go from our corrugated to our ribbed, and we're going to just change some of these settings. So between A is going to be 300 millimeters, B is going to be 9 millimeters, D is going to be 18 millimeters, C is 50, and we're going to call E 40 millimeters for now. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to click on my model, override, and I'm going to paint that the same black color. Clicking same with my floor plan, override all the colors, straight black, okay. And now we have our roof cladding created. We can come back into our ground floor plan, select all our walls, Alt G to regroup to make selection a lot easier. Select all the walls that we need to basically create this cladding for. Alt G and unclick those two walls there. CI tools, coverings, wall tool, and we're going to repeat the same steps we just did for the roof but in reverse. So ribbed, A in this instance is 50, B in this instance is 18, C is 9, D is 300, and E is 40, changing our materials and colors as we require. Clicking OK, making sure we align with the outside of all of our wall selections so that ArchiCAD knows where to create those materials and that cladding. Coming back into 3D, we can delete those two there, we don't need them, and we can delete that front door there as well, we do not need that. Finally, all I'm missing here, CI tools covering, roof covering, just clicking OK, creates that same max line wraparound roof. And to change the actual spacing here of what we see at the edge, CI tools covering, edit roof edges. This side here needs to be a barge, not a junction. Okay, and I can see my framing coming through, so Command T, coming to framing, let's just include framing, tick that off for the time being, and we lose our framing. The only thing missing from this design now is we'll come into the ground floor plan, go to our beam, draw a simple beam over here, tie that back into this wall, and introduce 3 or 4 columns on this section here. We will get what we're trying to create on this side of the page. So if I was to select both of these beams here, change them to a 120 by 35 millimeter, extend them to my ground ceiling, call it 2.7 instead of 3, click OK, select my 3 columns, Command T to open them up, 90 millimeter columns are absolutely fine, ground connected to 2.7, OK. We have our roof connection there as well. So these beams here would most likely be 300 deep and 350 even, basically just to hide the roof behind it. But overall, that design is 100% completed. The only thing we are missing is the concrete stairs and the landscape itself, but that is all dependent on the block, the site, and everything that you are creating for. But overall, the fundamental basic principles of this design are 100% completed. If you do want a copy of this PLN file that we've created today, it is linked down below via the Patreon link. So if you jump onto Patreon, sign up, you can grab this PLN file and every other PLN file I've created on YouTube and play around with it, mess around with it, do whatever you wish in your own time with this data. Anyway, that's all from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you learned something new. If you did, make sure you smash that subscribe button down below and don't forget about the like button. Believe it or not, that like button helps with the YouTube algorithm immensely. So I'd truly appreciate it if you smash that like button, left a comment down below what your favorite part of this tutorial was, and like always, I will see you next Monday.